Have you ever wondered why some people emerge stronger from the worst moments of their lives, while others remain stuck in suffering forever? Why are there people who transform a painful divorce into a new, better version of themselves, while others spend years dwelling on the same hurt? Imagine a man at the peak of his career, globally respected, who suddenly starts having strange visions, disturbing dreams, and feels he is losing his sanity. This man could have given in to despair, sought a more normal life, or simply ignored what was happening. But he did something completely different. He dove headfirst into his own darkness. This man was Carl Jung, and that decision changed not only his life, but the way we understand the human mind to this day. Jung discovered something that the ancients already knew, but that our modern society has completely forgotten. Pain is not just something to be avoided or medicated. It is the raw material for building a stronger, wiser, and more complete person. In the next few minutes, you will understand exactly how Jung developed a revolutionary method to transform any kind of suffering, be it a loss, a trauma, a disappointment, or even that existential angst that wakes you up in the middle of the night, into fuel for your personal growth. I'm not talking about toxic positivity or looking on the bright side. I'm talking about a scientific and practical approach that has already transformed millions of lives. If you feel it's time to stop being a hostage to this feeling and want to discover the strength that great thinkers can offer you, know that this channel is your refuge. Subscribe now and activate notifications, because the journey we begin today is just the first step. The fatal mistake everyone makes with pain. The first thing Jung realized, which will completely change your perspective, is that we have been conditioned to deal with pain in a totally wrong way. Think about it. What do you do when you feel emotional pain? You probably try to distract yourself, seek entertainment, maybe take a pill, or say that famous phrase, "I'll try not to think about it." Our society has taught us that pain is a problem that needs to be solved quickly, eliminated, medicated. Jung called this the escape from the shadow. He realized that the more we try to run away from what hurts us, the more power we give that pain over our lives. It's like trying not to think of a pink elephant. The more you try not to think about it, the more it occupies your mind. I'll give you a practical example. You end a relationship, and it hurts a lot. The tendency is to go out with friends every night, throw yourself into work, start using dating apps compulsively, anything to not feel that emptiness. But Jung discovered that this strategy not only doesn't work, but it also prevents you from extracting all the learning and growth that experience could give you. Pain, in Jung's view, is not a bug in the system. It's a feature. It is the psyche's way of forcing us to evolve, of showing us that something needs to change, that an old version of ourselves needs to die so a new one can be born. But if running from pain doesn't work, what is the alternative? Jung discovered something that seems counterintuitive, but is absolutely brilliant. The amplification technique. Diving into your own darkness, Jung developed a technique he called amplification. In simple terms, instead of running from the pain, you will amplify it. Dive into it consciously, like an explorer descending into an unknown cave. Sound crazy? Let me explain with a real example. One of Jung's patients was a woman suffering from severe depression after her mother's death. She tried everything to get over this: phase trips, new hobbies, conventional therapies. Nothing worked. Jung asked her to do the opposite, to dive completely into the pain of her loss. He asked her to dedicate an hour each day just to feeling her mother's absence, to remember all the moments they had together, to cry if necessary, to write letters to her dead mother. At first, she thought she would get even worse. But something extraordinary happened. After a few weeks of consciously diving into the pain, she began to notice patterns. She realized it wasn't just her mother she had lost, but also a part of herself that had always depended on maternal approval. She realized that the pain was trying to teach her something. It was time to develop her own internal source of validation. Amplification works because when you stop running from the pain and decide to explore it consciously, you gain power over it. It's the difference between being dragged by a current and deciding to swim with the current to use its force in your favor. But amplifying the pain is just the first step. Jung discovered that within all pain, there is something very specific, something he called the treasure guarded by the dragon. The treasure guarded by the dragon. Finding the gift within the pain, Jung was fascinated by mythology, and he noticed a pattern that repeats in every culture. The hero who must face a dragon to win a treasure. For Jung, this wasn't just a cool story. It was a map of the human psyche. The pain is the dragon. A treasure is what you can only learn, develop, or discover by going through that specific experience. I'll give you concrete examples. Example 1. Joe lost his job at 45. First came despair, the feeling of failure, financial anxiety. Instead of just looking for another similar job, he decided to amplify this experience. He dove into his professional insecurities, and he discovered something. He had hated what he did for 15 years, but never had the courage to admit it. The pain of unemployment was the push he needed to discover his true calling. Today, he has his own business and is much more fulfilled. Example 2. Maria was betrayed by her husband. The pain of betrayal forced her to look at patterns she had been ignoring for years. How she erased herself in the relationship. How she always put his needs before her own. The treasure guarded by that painful dragon was her discovering her own worth and developing healthy boundaries. Jung realized that each type of pain carries a specific type of treasure. The pain of rejection teaches you self-worth. The pain of loss teaches you to value the present. The pain of failure teaches you resilience and humility. The pain of loneliness teaches you self-companionship. The pain of betrayal teaches you discernment. The secret is to always ask, what is this pain trying to teach me? What part of me needs to grow to better handle this in the future? But Jung went even deeper. He discovered that there is a specific type of pain that is even more powerful for personal transformation. The shadow. Embracing your darkest aspects. One of Jung's most revolutionary discoveries was the concept of the shadow. The shadow is all those aspects of ourselves that we consider unacceptable, that we try to hide not only from others, but from ourselves. Everyone has a shadow. The guy who considers himself super generous, but has episodes of stinginess he prefers to forget. The woman who sees herself as always patient, but sometimes explodes with anger at her children. The professional who considers himself ethical, but has made some questionable decisions when no one was looking. Jung discovered something impressive. The greatest source of psychological pain comes precisely from trying to keep our shadow hidden. It is an exhausting mental job to pretend to be someone you are not completely. But here is the brilliant point. When you stop fighting your shadow and decide to integrate it consciously, you gain access to a gigantic source of energy. Let me give you a practical example. Carlos always saw himself as a good guy, incapable of hurting anyone. But deep down, he had a huge repressed anger at his abusive boss, his disrespectful wife, his ignorant children. This anger fermented inside, turning into depression, anxiety, and a constant feeling of being wronged by life. When Carlos started applying Jung's technique, he decided to look this anger straight in the face. Not to go around attacking everyone, but to understand what it was trying to communicate. He discovered that the anger was a sign that he was allowing himself to be disrespected. The anger was trying to teach him to be more assertive, to set boundaries, to value his own needs. Instead of being the nice guy who is never bothered by anything, Carlos learned to be the kind man who knows how to respect himself. The difference is gigantic. Jung called this integration of the shadow. It's when you stop wasting energy trying to be perfect and start using all that energy to be authentic. The individuation process. Becoming who you truly are. Jung believed that each person is born with a unique potential, like a seed that carries within it the blueprint of a specific tree. But most people never become that unique tree. Instead, they try to mold themselves to what their family expects, to what society values, to what is normal or safe. He called the process of becoming who you truly are individuation. And guess what the main fuel for this process is? Exactly. Pain. Jung realized that every time you feel genuine emotional pain, it's because some authentic part of you is being repressed, denied, or forced to adapt to something that doesn't suit it. I'll give you a personal example that happened to me. I spent years trying to be the serious and respectable professional my family expected. I wore a suit, spoke formally, avoided controversial topics. But inside, I felt a constant anguish, as if I were wearing clothes that were the wrong size. Pain of this inauthenticity grew until it became unbearable. That's when I decided to apply Jung's technique. I consciously dove into this anguish. I asked, what is this pain trying to tell me? The answer came slowly. I was betraying my nature. I had always been more irreverent, more direct, more willing to question things everyone else accepts. When I started to honor these characteristics, even if it meant disappointing some expectations, the anguish disappeared. Jung said that each person has what he called the self, their most authentic essence. And all emotional pain is, deep down, a sign that you are moving away from yourself. Individuation is not about becoming better than others. It's about becoming more yourself. And paradoxically, the more you become yourself, the more you can genuinely connect with other people. But how do you do this in practice? Jung developed a specific technique that he used not only with patients, but in his own life. Active imagination. Talking to your inner demons. One of the most powerful techniques Jung developed was active imagination. It's a method for you to literally converse with different aspects of your psyche, including those that cause pain. Let me explain how it works with a practical example. Imagine you have chronic anxiety about the future. Instead of trying to eliminate this anxiety, Jung would suggest that you personify it. Give it a form. It could be a person, an animal, an object, anything that comes naturally to your imagination. Let's say your anxiety appears as an older, always worried woman who constantly warns you about all possible dangers. Instead of trying to silence this woman, you will have a conversation with her. You ask, "Why are you always so worried?" She replies, "Because I'm trying to protect you. If you don't worry about everything that could go wrong, you'll be caught off guard." You continue, "I understand you want to protect me, but your constant worries are preventing me from living. How about we make a deal? Once a week, I will dedicate 1 hour to listen to all your concerns and make a plan. The rest of the time, you let me live in the present." Seem strange? Jung used this technique for over 16 years in his own life and managed not only to overcome his own internal conflicts, but also to develop some of the most important theories. In modern psychology, active imagination works because it recognizes that different parts of your personality have valid needs and perspectives. Instead of trying to suppress the problematic aspects, you negotiate with them, find ways to honor their legitimate concerns without being dominated by them. But Jung went even further. He discovered that there is a type of pain that is especially transformative. The midlife crisis, when life forces you to grow. Jung was probably the first psychologist to recognize that there is a natural crisis that occurs around the ages of 35 to 45, which he called the midlife crisis. But for Jung, this crisis was not a problem, it was a golden opportunity. He realized that in the first half of life, our natural focus is on building career, family, status, security. But a moment comes when these external achievements no longer satisfy. You look at everything you've built and think, is this it? Is this what I've lived for so far? This feeling of emptiness, of deep questioning, is painful. Many people try to solve this by buying new things, changing jobs, sometimes even ending relationships. But Jung discovered that this pain is signaling something much deeper. It's time to focus on the second half of life. If the first half is about building, the second half is about finding meaning. It's about asking, what is my unique purpose? How can I contribute genuinely? What really matters? I'll tell you about one of Jung's patients, a 42-year-old executive who had it all. A big house, a luxury car, 2 children, a stable marriage. But she woke up every morning with a feeling of emptiness. She thought she had depression. Jung helped her realize it wasn't depression. It was a call to evolution. That feeling of emptiness was signaling that she had fulfilled the expectations of the first half of life, but had not yet discovered her unique purpose in the second half. She began to explore aspects of herself that she had neglected: her artistic creativity, her interest in social causes, her need to contribute to something bigger than herself. Gradually, the feeling of emptiness was replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. Jung said that the midlife crisis is like a second birth. The first birth is physical. The second is spiritual. It's when you are born to who you really are, not to who they thought you should be. But perhaps Jung's most impressive discovery was about a specific type of suffering that can catapult someone to a completely new level of development. The confrontation with death, the pain that transforms. Everything. Jung realized that there is a type of pain that is especially transformative, the direct confrontation with one's own mortality. Whether through a serious illness, the loss of someone very close, or even a deep depression that makes you question if life is worth living. These moments are brutal, but Jung discovered that they are also the greatest opportunities for psychological growth that exist. He went through it himself. At 68, Jung had a severe heart attack and several near-death experiences. During his recovery, he had visions and insights that completely changed his perspective on life. Jung realized that when you truly accept that you are going to die, not just intellectually, but emotionally, 2 things happen. First, you stop wasting energy on irrelevant things. That fight with the neighbor, that worry about what others will think, that anxiety about a problem that might not even happen. All of this loses importance in the face of the reality of death. Second, you gain a healthy urgency to live authentically. If you have limited time, and everyone does, why on earth would you spend that time pretending to be someone you're not? I'll give you a practical example. Roberto was diagnosed with cancer at 50. The first few months were total panic, but as he processed the real possibility of death, something changed. He stopped accepting jobs he hated just for the money. He started talking more openly with his family about his feelings. He decided to travel to places he had always wanted. To see. The most interesting part, Roberto was cured. And he swears that the illness was the best thing that ever happened to him, because it forced him to stop living on autopilot and start living for real. Jung called this the confrontation with the self. It's when the proximity of death forces you to distinguish between what is essential and what is superfluous in your life. But Jung discovered that you don't have to wait for a tragedy to access this transformative power of pain. The method. The method of voluntary descent. Consciously diving into your own darkness. Jung developed what he called voluntary descent, a method for you to consciously dive into your darkest and most painful aspects, without waiting for life to force you to do it. It's like doing controlled pain training to strengthen yourself psychologically. Let me explain how it works in practice. Step 1. Identification. You consciously choose an area of your life where you feel pain, discomfort, or resistance. It could be a specific fear, an insecurity, a painful memory, an aspect of your personality you don't like. Step 2. Controlled amplification. Instead of running from this pain, you dedicate a specific time to dive into it consciously. Jung recommended at least 30 minutes in a safe environment where you can feel everything without distractions. Step 3. Inner dialogue. You talk to this pain as if it were a person. You ask, what are you trying to teach me? What are you trying to protect me from? What do you need from me? Step 4. Integration. You look for practical ways to honor the message of that pain in your daily life. I'll give you an example of how I use this in my own life. I had a chronic fear of being professionally rejected. Every time I had to present a new idea or take a stand on something controversial, I felt a terrible knot in my stomach. Instead of continuing to avoid these situations, I decided to do the voluntary descent. I dedicated an entire afternoon to diving into this fear. I imagined the worst possible rejections, felt all the shame and humiliation they would bring back in the middle of this process. I realized something. This fear was trying to protect me from something very specific. It didn't want me to be authentic, because being authentic is risky. Authentic people are more easily rejected than people who try to please everyone. But I also realized that living to please everyone was a way of dying while alive. So I made a deal with my fear. I will risk being rejected for being authentic, but I will do it strategically, choosing well when and how to expose myself. Result: my anxiety about rejection decreased drastically, and ironically, I began to be more accepted professionally, because people can tell when you are being genuine. But Jung discovered that there is an even more powerful way to transform pain into strength. Psychological alchemy. Transforming lead into gold. Jung was fascinated by medieval alchemy, that practice of trying to turn common metals into gold. But he realized that the alchemists weren't just talking about chemistry. They were using metaphors to describe psychological transformation. The lead is the heaviest, densest, and most painful aspects of the human experience. Traumas, fears, insecurities, addictions, destructive patterns. The gold is the wisdom, inner strength, and authenticity that can be extracted from these difficult experiences. Jung developed a process he called psychological alchemy, a systematic method for transforming any painful experience into personal growth. The process has 4 stages, which the alchemists called negredo, the black phase. This is when you fully recognize and accept your pain, without trying to minimize, rationalize, or run away. It's the moment to look at the lead of your life and say, okay, this is part of me, and that's okay. Albedo, the white phase. This is when you begin to separate what is truly yours from what has been placed on you by others. Many of our pains come from expectations, judgments, and patterns that are not genuinely ours. Citronate, as the yellow phase. This is when you identify the lesson, the gift, the hidden treasure within that painful experience. All suffering carries a message about how you need to grow. Rubed. Oh, the red phase. This is when you integrate this new wisdom into your practical life. You don't just intellectually understand what you've learned, but you change behaviors, make different choices, live differently. Let me give you an example of how this works. Situation. Maria was cheated on by her husband after 15 years of marriage. Negredo. Instead of trying to get over it quickly or distract herself, Maria took the time to fully feel the pain of betrayal. She cried, allowed herself to feel anger, resentment, humiliation. Albedo. Maria began to separate what was really about her from what was about her husband. She realized she had patterns of self-effacement in relationships that came from her upbringing, not from who she really was. Citronitis. Maria identified the gift within the pain. The betrayal forced her to develop self-love, to establish healthy boundaries, to value her own needs. Rubedo. Maria not only rebuilt her life, but became a stronger, more authentic, and wiser person. When she eventually entered a new relationship, it was in a completely different way, more balanced and healthy. Jung said that when you learn to perform this psychological alchemy, no experience is wasted. Everything can be transformed into growth. But there is an aspect of Jung's theory that is even more revolutionary. The collective, unconscious, connecting with ancestral wisdom. Archetype. Asking, how would a hero handle this situation? What heroic qualities do I need to develop? The sage archetype. All cultures value the wisdom that comes from experience. When you are suffering, you can connect with this archetype by asking, what wisdom is this experience trying to teach me? How can I use this to help others in the future? The warrior archetype. All cultures recognize the importance of courage and resistance. In the most difficult moments, you can activate this archetype by asking, what internal battle do I need to win? What strength do I need to develop? I'll give you a personal example. When I went through a period of deep depression, I felt completely isolated and misunderstood. But when I started studying Jung, I realized that the journey through darkness is a universal theme. I found strength in stories of transformation from completely different cultures: shamans who went through symbolic deaths, mystics who went through dark nights of the soul, mythological heroes who descended into the underworld and returned renewed. This made me realize that my pain was not a personal failure or a sign of weakness. It was part of a process of transformation that is fundamentally human. Jung discovered that there is a specific force that emerges when you learn to consciously transform pain. The transcendent function. The power of integrating opposites. Jung discovered something fascinating. The psychologically strongest people are not those who avoid contradictions, but those who learn to integrate seemingly opposite aspects of the human experience. He called this the transcendent function, the ability to hold tensions without trying to resolve everything quickly, and to find creative syntheses between seemingly incompatible extremes. For example, in our culture, we tend to see some qualities as opposites: strength versus vulnerability, confidence vs humility, independence versus connection, rationality versus intuition. But Jung realized that the most psychologically mature people can be simultaneously strong and vulnerable. They know when to show strength and when to ask for help. Confident and humble. They believe in themselves but recognize their limitations. Independent and connected. They maintain autonomy without isolating themselves. Rational and intuitive. They use both logic and intuition. And here is the crucial point. Pain is often the catalyst that forces us to develop this transcendent function. I'll give you a practical example. Pedro always saw himself as a rational and controlled guy. He avoided showing emotions, made decisions based only on logic, and looked down on people he considered too emotional. But at 35, he went through a brutal divorce that left him emotionally devastated. At first, Pedro tried to handle the situation in his usual way, rationalizing, making lists of pros and cons, trying to solve his emotions as if they were math problems. It didn't work. The pain was too great to be rationalized. That's when Pedro discovered Jung and began to apply the transcendent function. Instead of trying to choose between being rational or emotional, he learned to integrate both aspects. He began to use reason to understand his emotions, and emotions to inform his rational decisions. Result: Pedro became a much more complete person. He maintained his analytical ability, but developed emotional intelligence. He remained assertive, but learned to be empathetic as well. He didn't lose his independence, but developed the capacity to connect genuinely with other people. Jung said that when you develop the transcendent function, You stop being a slave to extremes and gain access to a much wider range of internal resources. But perhaps the most practical application of Jung's theory is a specific method that anyone can use. Jung said that when you learn to listen to your dreams, you gain access to an internal counselor who works 24/7 to help you navigate life's challenges. But Jung went even further and developed a technique for working with pain that doesn't even require dreams, the personification technique. Giving form to your internal conflicts, one of the most practical techniques Jung developed was personification, giving human form to your conflicts, fears, pains, and problematic aspects of your personality. The idea is simple but revolutionary. Instead of fighting against your internal problems, you treat them as people with whom you need to negotiate. I'll teach you the step-by-step method. Step 1. Identify the problem. Choose an aspect of your life that is causing pain or conflict. It could be anxiety, procrastination, low self-esteem, anger, anything. Step 2. Give the problem a form. Imagine that this problem is a person. What do they look like? How old are they? How do they dress? How do they talk? Let the image emerge naturally, without forcing it. Step 3. Have a conversation, literally talk to this person. Ask why they act the way they do, what they are afraid of, what they want for you. Step 4. Negotiate a solution. Look for an agreement that honors the legitimate concerns of this person, without letting them dominate your life. I'll give you an example of how I used this. I had a terrible inner procrastinator. Every time I needed to do something important, an internal force would push me towards distractions, social media, TV shows, anything but what I really needed to do. I applied Jung's technique. I imagined my procrastinator as a rebellious teenager, about 16 years old, who hated anything that seemed like an obligation. When I started talking to him, I discovered something interesting. He wasn't just being irresponsible. He was trying to protect me from the fear of failure. In his mind, if I didn't try to do things well, I wouldn't run the risk of discovering I wasn't competent. I negotiated with him. I understand you don't want me to get hurt by failing. How about this? I will try to do things the best I can, but I will accept that it won't always be perfect. And you let me work without sabotaging me all the time. It worked. My procrastination decreased drastically because I stopped fighting against it and started working with it. Jung called this the differentiation of psychic functions. It's when you recognize that different aspects of your personality have their own agendas, and you learn to be the internal leader who coordinates these different voices instead of being dominated by them. But Jung discovered something even more profound about the nature of psychological transformation. The concept of enantiodromia, how extremes transform into their opposites. Jung borrowed a fascinating concept from Greek philosophers. Enantiodromia. It's the idea that any psychological extreme, when taken to its limit, naturally transforms into its opposite. In practical terms, this means that the extreme perfectionist eventually becomes sloppy. The super-controlled person eventually explodes uncontrollably. Someone who constantly avoids conflict eventually becomes aggressive. The compulsive workaholic can eventually become totally apathetic. But here is the brilliant point. Jung discovered that you can consciously use this principle to transform pain into strength. If you are suffering because of an extreme in your personality, instead of fighting it, you can consciously cultivate its complementary opposite. I'll give you practical examples. Example 1. Carla was extremely self-critical. She lived in constant anxiety because nothing she did was ever good enough. Applying enantiodromia, she consciously began to cultivate the opposite, the acceptance of imperfection. She didn't abandon excellence, but she balanced it with self-compassion. Example 2. Roberto was addicted to pleasing everyone. He suffered constantly because he erased himself to avoid any kind of conflict. Applying enantiodromia, he consciously began to practice assertiveness. He didn't become an aggressive guy, but he learned to balance harmony with authenticity. Example 3. Mariana was extremely independent. She never asked for help, never showed vulnerability. This left her isolated and emotionally exhausted. Applying enantiodromia, she consciously began to practice interdependence, maintaining her autonomy, but also cultivating genuine connections. Secret is not to completely abandon the problematic aspect, but to develop its complementary opposite to create balance. Jung said that a psychologically mature person is not one who has eliminated their flaws, but one who has developed complementary qualities that create internal balance. With all these tools in mind, it's time to look at the big picture and understand how to apply all of this to modern life. We have reached the end of this journey through the mind of one of the greatest explorers of the human psyche. And I want you to take a moment and reflect on something. Everything we've seen today are not just interesting theories about Jung. They are practical tools you can start applying today to transform any pain you are feeling into fuel for your personal growth. Think about the difference between how you viewed pain at the beginning of this video and how you can view it now. Before, pain was probably just a bad thing that needed to be avoided, medicated, or eliminated as quickly as possible. Now you know that pain is information. It's raw material. It's the push life gives you when you need to evolve to the next level. You learn that pain is not a bug in the system. It's a feature that forces evolution. Running from pain only increases its power over your life. Each specific type of pain carries a specific type of treasure. Your shadow, when integrated, becomes a source of energy. Your internal conflicts can be negotiated instead of repressed. Psychological extremes can be balanced with their opposites. You have access to the collective wisdom of all humanity. But more important than all of this, you learn that transforming pain into strength is not a passive process. It's not about accepting and waiting for things to get better on their own. It's an active, conscious, almost scientific process of diving into your own experience and extracting from it everything that can make you grow. I want you to look at your current life with these new eyes. What pain are you feeling today? What aspect of your experience have you been trying to avoid, medicate, or eliminate? Maybe it's that anxiety about the future that wakes you up in the middle of the night. Maybe it's the loneliness you feel, even when surrounded by people. Maybe it's the frustration with your job, with your relationships, with your own limitations. Maybe it's something deeper, a feeling that you are living someone else's life, that you are wasting your potential, that time is passing and you are not becoming who you truly are. Whatever your pain is, I want you to know, it is not there to destroy you. It is there to transform you. But only if you have the courage to apply what Jung discovered, to consciously dive into it, amplify it, talk to it, discover the treasure it is guarding. The difference between people who emerge stronger from difficulties and people who get stuck in suffering is not the type of pain they face. It's how they relate to that pain. It's whether they run from it or use the tools Jung developed to transform it into wisdom, strength, and authenticity. You have a choice to make now. Can continue to deal with pain the old way, running, distracting yourself, hoping it will go away on its own. Or you can start applying Jung's method, consciously diving into your own experience and extracting from it everything that can help you evolve. Jung spent decades developing these techniques not out of academic curiosity, but because he himself went through periods of intense psychological pain and discovered that they could be transformed into the most valuable experiences of human life. Philosophy is not a set of dead words in old books. It is a weapon for life. What we've seen today is just one of the many tools we can use to sculpt an existence with more purpose, strength, and authenticity. If this message resonated with you and you wish to continue on this journey of self-discovery and empowerment, do your part. Subscribe to the channel and join our community of thinkers. The next video might hold the key to your next great challenge. The question that remains is simple. Will you continue to be a victim of your pain, or will you learn to transform it into your greatest source of strength? The choice is yours. Jung has already given you the map. Now it's time to start the journey.